What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today we're going to be taking you through a Titan build using the Stoicism with Severance Enclosure as well as Synthoceps, but you can use just Severance Enclosure for this build, mainly what I went around with it. Plus, I got asked on a few comments to make an Arc and Void build with this, so this is the Arc version using Severance Enclosure as your main exotic. I just threw on Stoicism, that exotic class item, because it helps with everything, especially since it has Synthoceps, but you can really use either one. So with this build, with the Spirit of Severance right here, powered melee or finisher final blows unleash a damaging explosion. Pretty nice considering what we're using this build for, and with our artifact this season as well. Our second trait we have on the Stoicism is the Spirit of Synthoceps, improved melee damage when we are surrounded, so just adds to the Severance Spirit for those melee final blows and that explosion. We're trying to use this hard for the melee side of this build. Actually pretty fun. Went through that contest of elders on the final realm, or the final roam if you will. It is pretty much the same as a GM difficulty wise, with how you're capped and how it's all the way up to like 2050 for the level of the enemies. So just take that into consideration when using this build. It can get you through everything from endgame content to the easiest just normal strikes. So with this build, we're using our roaming super because it is coming back super quick with that buff, getting it roughly 3 times faster than we used to. Plus we're blinding enemies and can use it for unstoppable champions. For me, I'm using Towering Barricade, Strafe Lift. For me, I'm using Seismic Strike because we're blinding enemies, and when we are amplified, the blinding radius is increased. We're becoming amplified very easily with this build. Pulse Grenade right here for us, just the best in my personal opinion for what we're using down here in our Fragments, as well as just in general for the PvE realm. Now for me, I'm using Touch of Thunder, so Pulse Grenade will give us Ionic Traces periodically and increase its damage over time, making it even better. For us, those Ionic Traces gonna help us to get back our ability energy, so really nice for ability spam on this build, helping us to use that Seismic Strike and Pulse Grenade even more. With last but not least, for our aspects, we got Knockout, so that melee range and damage is increased when we are critically wounded or break a shield. When we are amplified, it is even better, and defeating targets makes us amplified and restores our health, so really nice for giving us that survivability. Plus again, pairs with that Severance Enclosure and with the Stoicism that I have on. Spark of Shock is our next option because we're using this to jolt enemies with our Pulse Grenade. Spark of Resistance, when surrounded we are more resistant to incoming damage, works perfect sense. This is definitely a melee build and we are getting up close and personal as often as possible. Spark of Recharge, while critically wounded, our melee and grenade energy regenerates more quickly. Also very nice for the ability spam, using our melee as much as possible, jolting targets with our grenade as well. And then Spark of Feedback, we are getting more melee damage after we get hit with a melee, so adding to the build of how we're building this out for melees and using that Severance Enclosure Synthoceps combo with the Stoicism. Now real quick, the prismatic side of this build, using the Stoicism instead of the Arc side with the Severance Enclosure, I'm going Blade Fury with Towering Barricades, Strafe Lift, a Hammer Strike as our melee, can really use any of our melees to get this to proc. With a Pulse Grenade, we got Diamond Lance, so we can get that freeze and shatter, of course. Knockout again for that increased damage on the melee range, definitely pairs well with Stoicism with that Severance in general. Now we got ourselves Facet of Courage for that extra damage of our Arc and Solar abilities, so both of these are going to do more damage on Arc, or I should say Stasis and Strand debuff targets. We're going to get Strand debuff definitely with this in severing by hitting those rapid precision shots. Facet of Balance right here, defeating light damage is giving us melee energy for our Hammer Strike. Darkness energy is going to give us our grenade, so another way for us to spam those. And then a Facet of Awakening, so we can create even more of those elemental pickups. For us, we're going to get Fire Sprites, Ionic Traces, Stasis Shards, and Tangles with this build. And then last but not least, a Facet of Honor, collecting those elemental pickups. Tangles grants us Transcendent energy, so we're also going to become Transcendent very fast with this side of the build if you want to use this and the Stoicism. Now, for the way that I have this built out, no matter if you're using the exotic class item or the actual Severance Enclosure chest piece, you can go with your resilience as number 1, strength as number 2. Then I just tried to put these 3 in intellect, discipline, recovery, basically at the middle of the road. Mobility for Titan really doesn't matter in my personal opinion. As for the mods that we're throwing on right here, for our helmet, you could use whatever you wanted. For ammo finder, totally up to you. I was using heavy just because it felt right. We're getting our super bag even faster with all those melee defeats that we are getting, because we are building this into melee build, like I said, for that Severance Enclosure, Arc Siphon, so we can get more orbs of power with the arc side of this build, and our weapons, melee Kickstarter, all of those orbs of power and armor charges that we're using. For the melee, when we use it, we're going to get a chunk based on the number of armor charges that we have. Momentum transfer, impact induction, we do damage with our grenade, and melee, we're going to get the other one back. So very nice little internal feedback loop, if you will, for this build, just doing damage with that grenade as well as our melee. Up to you, whatever you're going into content wise. For the activity, you can throw on different types of resistant mods, totally up to you, like I said, and the content event that you are going into. For me, I went with kinetic scavenger as well as harmonic scavenger, so when I do pick up those bricks, whether it be heavy or my kinetic weapon that I'm using in a shotgun, I'm gonna get a little bit of extra ammo. That's why you can switch this on and off up here depending on what you feel like you need most. And then I went with Reaper, powerful attraction, outreach in our class item down here. So when we use our ability, we're gonna get our melee. When we use our class ability, we're gonna get all those orbs of power that are around us, and then we're also gonna help to create even more orbs of power with Reaper. So tying back into melee Kickstarter, getting that melee as quick as we can with 100 strength, and using either that Severance Enclosure, Stoicism, like I said, so we can get all of those powered melee defeats and finishers for those explosions. Now, we are going to be using the exact same mod setup, no matter if we're using the Stoicism or the Severance Enclosure. You can just switch those out. I'm keeping the exact same stats for resilience and strength. Totally up to you, depending on if you're using Prismatic or Arc Titan. All you got to do is switch out your chest piece for your class item. Now, when we move on to our weapons that we are going to be using, anti-barrier for shotgun, unstoppable is going to be with our super, and then we are also, with all the jolt that we're going to be doing, able to do overload. So for me, I went with perfect paradox with pugilist and 1-2 punch. The first reason for this is because unstoppable. Second reason is we got 1-2 punch, so hitting all of the pellets in one shot increases melee damage, which is nice for this build because Severance Enclosure pairing into that feedback, and then final blows with this weapon also give us melee energy. Dealing melee energy improves weapon handling, so super good weapon to have with that double pugilist 1-2 punch that pairs super well with our striker titan Severance Enclosure for the melee build. For me, I went with centrifuge as my auto rifle, as my just kinetic weapon, if you will, because we're able to reload the weapon when we sprint, and amplification overcharges the weapon. When we have that overcharge, we are able to cause explosions which blind targets, also a very good thing, adding to the arc synergy of this build. Last but not least, for the damage aspect of it, we're going to be using the bittersweet from this episode with envious arsenal bait and switch on this, so we can really crank out that DPS. And again, it is on the arc side of the build, so we're getting that synergy with it, plus our artifact is going to help this as well as our centrifuge do a little bit more damage. Last but certainly not least, we got ourselves our Apothecary Satchel right here, so anti-barrier shotgun for that perfect paradox, being able to stun those champions, authorized melee mod since this is a melee based build, using it for finishers, etc. with that Severance Enclosure. We got ourselves Killing Breeze for increased mobility with enhanced ether generator, so our grenade launcher has the chance to spawn those extra dark ether charges. Total carnage, after finishing a powerful combatant, we gain temporary damage resistant. Very good combination with this build because we are getting up close and personal and using that Severance Enclosure, finishing a lot with this build. Deliberating Wave, also a very synergetic build perk for this, with finishers emitting a blinding explosion for us in top of the explosion that we're getting from Severance Enclosure. Enclosure. So adding to the synergy of this build, concussive reloader, using a grenade launcher to damage a boss, damage a champion, break a combatant shield, weakens them, adding to the DPS side of this build, especially with that bittersweet grenade launcher and that envious bait and switch on it. Curative orbs right here. First time breaking a combatant shield or breaking a shield of a guardian gives us orbs of power, helping us to have that melee kickstarter up all the time basically, and just in general get back our super, use it for a bunch of different reasons. Now onto arc compounding. Arc sources deal increased damage to blinded targets, so with our super in general going to be doing more damage because that'll blind, and then it is an arc damage, so a little internal feedback loop right there. Plus centrifuge, when it is charged up, that is also blinding targets, which will then do more damage. All of our arc abilities will, and top of that we are doing conductive cosmic crystals, so our arc abilities as well as that Dark Ether Reaper origin trait is going to do bonus damage to targets affected by stasis, which is going to be nice because a lot of people are using stasis debuffs, whether it be in our Tenacious Mastery sidearm because that thing is disgusting with chill clip, or a lot of people using Rhymecoat Warlocks this season with those bunch of shatter crystals going on, stasis turrets. So this is going to be procced definitely pretty easy. Our arc ability, melee, our grenade, our super going to do more damage, as well as our Dark Ether Reaper heavy grenade launcher. So we're going to be able to weaken with this build, we're going to be able to blind, we're going to be able to jolt, we're going to get our super back very quickly, we're going to have that Severance Enclosure chest piece if you are using that, create a bunch of explosions with your finishers and melee final blows. If you're using the Stoicism that I have, you get the added bonus of Synthoceps, where our melee is going to be even more juicy than it would be with just the Severance Enclosure. So we got a lot of different options with this. A lot of people can go either way. I know everybody has a Severance Enclosure or can get a Severance Enclosure. Everybody should be able to get a exotic class item at this point inside of Destiny 2. Definitely a lot of different ways to snag it and get into that mission. Whatever you gotta do, definitely worth it and very good, but you always got the normal exotic to back it up. So appreciate all you guys for coming back to the channel, really appreciate it. Don't be afraid to like and subscribe, hit that bell if you haven't so you get the notifications on the builds that we put out, as well as the guides that we have for god rolls. Don't be afraid to join the Discord as well, we're trying to get that fully popping. So appreciate all you guys again for supporting me and the channel. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.